Hello and welcome. Bluepoint Leadership Development and BLR Learning are excited that you have joined us today for the start of this four-part webinar series, the Bluepoint Leader as Coach. Today, we will begin with session number 1, the fundamentals of coaching. My name is Julie Henry, Director of Client Services with Bluepoint. Our guide today is Greg Thompson. Greg is a keynote speaker, author, and executive leadership coach with a passion for developing the greatness in individuals and organizations. As president of Bluepoint, Greg leads a talented group of professionals who design and deliver challenging educational experiences that accelerate the development of leaders. Greg is the co-author of several books, including The Master Coach. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you, Julie. I'm indeed delighted to be here today in this for this first in a series of webinars on the topic of leader as coach. I'm also very honored to be leading this particular group. We have well over 1,000 participants registered today. There are participants from small companies to large. We have senior executives through to HR managers through to professional coaches. So I'm thrilled to be here. At Bluepoint, we provide coach training to thousands of leaders every year, and I'm honored to share some of our experiences with you here today. Let me just take you quickly through our agenda and what we have planned for you. We're going to start and look at this idea of coaching and leadership, particularly focusing on the idea of coaching and a new breed of leader. We're going to look at this concept called a coaching perspective. I'm going to spend a little bit of time exploring how you can master the art of coaching. And then I'm going to give you an overview of what we call the 3C coaching model. And the 3C coaching model is not so much a specific step-by-step coaching model, but it's more a framework for looking at this idea of coaching. And in fact, will form the agenda for the next 3 coaching sessions. I would also ask you to maybe have a paper and pencil available through this webinar. I've got a few exercises that I think you'll find interesting, and you'll probably want to jot down a few notes as we do those exercises. But just to start off the session, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. And if you'd like, I'd like you to reflect on these questions. First, what did you do yesterday that is worth talking about today? What did you do yesterday that is worth talking about today? Second question, is your best work ahead of you or behind you? Is your best work ahead of you or behind you? I wanted to share those questions with you because at its very core, this idea of coaching is about helping people think differently and take action. And it's my hope that as you thought of those questions, which are pretty profound personal questions, that something moved inside you. You gave some energy to some aspects of your work or your life that created some kind of a fresh curiosity. And I want to do this just so you can be thinking about coaching very much from a personal perspective as we go through our conversation here today. So any look at coaching really needs to start with this idea, what does great coaching look like? I mean, how can you identify it? How would you measure it? How could you, if you could see it, what would it look like? And I think it's important for us to take an outcome base to our measurement of coaching. In other words, in my organization, Bluepoint and BLR, I really only can be measured by what other people do in some way. And so an interesting way of looking at it is this. If it was illegal to be a great coach, would there be enough evidence to convict you? If it was illegal to be a great coach. So I would encourage you to look around your team, your organization, and what would you have to see? What outcomes would you have to see so that you would be measured as a great coach? I would suggest that you want to see people who are committed, people who are learning, there's a culture of learning, people that are more productive than others, people that feel personally accountable. When we look at them, they look at themselves in their career as growing in some way. So when you think of coaching, there's a number of tools and approaches and concepts that we will introduce. I would really encourage you to always bring your focus back to what is the impact on my team? What is the impact on the people around me? Are they functioning in a different way because of me? There's a big idea here about leadership and conversations. And though lots of leadership happens in large meetings and in task forces and in quarterly reviews and the like, quite frankly, probably 95% of leadership happens one conversation at a time. So be thinking about the 5, 10, 15 conversations that you have every day. How many of those would be considered leadership conversations? And the quality of a leadership conversation is that the other person leaves the conversation better in some way. They leave challenged, they leave encouraged, they leave inspired. Something is different. So when we look at the idea of coaching, it is important to think about coaching in the broadest sense, in the sense of a formal coaching conversation and a formal coaching conversation. I would also encourage you to be thinking about this. How can I increase the quality of every conversation I have through the course of the day by being more coach-like in that conversation? So let's look at coaching and what I consider to be a new breed of leader. And all leaders to some extent, but I am pretty convinced that as we move forward in the marketplace, in the demographics that we have, the technology advancements, new cultural norms, that the leader of the future needs to master the art of coaching. But you know what is really cool about this is I am so encouraged by the young leaders coming into the workforce who really see themselves quite readily, not as the hero leader, not as somebody that's going to make all the decisions and be the person with all the great ideas, but somebody that is a catalyst for the performance of others, a catalyst for other people being innovative, really a catalyst for the growth and development of others. So I'm really encouraged about that, and I'm looking forward to being part of that next generation of leadership. At Bluepoint, we often use the man on the tightrope as a metaphor for your work. It is easy for folks like me, a professional coach, to come in and talk to leaders about how you should be more coach-like in all that you do. I think we also need to recognize that a first-line supervisor through to a chief executive officer has many demands that the external coach doesn't have. They need to manage performance. They need to attend to a number of different constituents, and they're also being called upon to coach. I recognize that it's challenging, but the successful leaders in most progressive organizations are now seeing their role very much as doing all the other things, giving direction where needed, being a teacher, being a mentor, being an advisor, but also making that shift to becoming the great coach. So why coach? When we look at this idea, like why coach? Coaching is really not a fad. And though it's very popular these days, it is clearly an effective way of leadership. All evidence tells us that. But also, you know, when we look back on great leaders, most of us have had great leaders in our past. They have been very coach-like. Even if they didn't use the coach word or the coach designation, most great leaders in the past who have really impacted us have been very coach-like. And so this idea of coaching is a timeless leadership idea. What I'd like you to do here for the first exercise that we're going to do together, I'd like you to just give some thought to the 6 people who you interact with most on a daily basis, who, if they performed at their very best, would have the most positive impact on your part of the organization, your team, your division, maybe if you're a CEO, maybe the organization as a whole. So quickly write the names down. 6 people who could make a real impact. 6 people who, if they performed at their very best, would have the most impact on your organization. So as you're listening to this webinar today, I'm going to encourage you to continue to reflect upon those 6 people and be thinking about this. In all honesty, would they attribute their performance, their high performance, their learning, their development, their abilities, would they attribute that to you? My thesis is that if you're functioning in a coach-like manner, the evidence will show up in these people. People around the organization will attribute their high performance, learning, career development, etc. to you. So second exercise I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about your own history. I'd like you to pick somebody in your history, in your career, in your life, who was at that crossroads for you. Somebody who maybe was the most important person in your your career. Maybe it was somebody that is currently your boss. Maybe it's a mother, brother, sister, uncle. Maybe it was your first professor at university. Whoever that might be, I'd like you to pick somebody who in some way helped you make a significant uplift in your game, your career, your performance, your learning, your attitude, whatever that might be. And so if you just write that person's name down, who would that person be? And then secondly, what did they do to have an impact on you? So think about it. What qualities did they have? What behaviors were predominant? What made them so coach-like for you? Now, we've had the cool opportunity at Bluepoint to ask that same question, literally of thousands and thousands of leaders around the world. And my guess is the responses that we've received from the participants in our workshops will be very similar to the responses the response that you had here today. Somebody encouraged me. Somebody really listened to me. Somebody took a chance on me. Somebody confronted me. Somebody gave me a new perspective. Somebody challenged me. Somebody invested in me. Somebody cared about me. Somebody stretched me. Somebody told me a hard truth, a truth that others would not. Somebody saw something in me that I couldn't even see in myself. I've had the great honor of coaching some very, very successful executives of some very large corporations, men and women who have really succeeded in many ways. And this one is universal for them. Almost every person that I've ever worked with that has risen to the top of the house in a major organization can reflect back on their career and identify that person. Somebody saw something in me I couldn't even see in myself. I just wonder how many times we're passing somebody in the hallway and we don't take the time to look at them and to see that potential in them in some way. So when you look at all these responses that we have received, my guess is that you have one of these. One of these identifies the qualities or behaviors of that person who's at the crossroads for you. So the challenge for all of us is this, is we know what great coaching is. It's right there on the screen. Does that describe us? Are we doing this intentionally every day? Are we encouraging people, really listening to people? Are we telling people the hard truth? Are we looking for things in people that they can't even see in themselves? The mystery has really been taken out of coaching. We all know what great coaching is. The challenge for us is really to be the kind of person that would show up in somebody else's story. I will, as we move on though, I'd like to leave you with one idea to be thinking about here. Think about those 6 people that you identified earlier. If they were on this call, and if I asked them to identify their personal best coach, would your name be on their lips? As we look at this idea of coaching, I think we need to look at it in terms of what does it mean for us as leaders, and what does it mean for us in comparison and in association with everything else that we do as leaders. I'm going to introduce to you in a moment here what we call the coaching impact model that might give you some insight into when to coach and maybe when not to coach. But before I do that, I want to share with you the terminology we use in Bluepoint so you'll recognize it as I go through the slides. If you are the leader coach, that term is pretty self-evident. When I use that term, it's the person doing the coaching. When I use talent, I am referring to the person receiving the coaching. So anytime I use the term the talent, I'm talking about the person receiving the coaching. So this is what we call the coaching impact model, and along the bottom is what we call the leadership continuum. And the leadership continuum moves from directing to advising to teaching to mentoring to coaching. All important, all legitimate ways of functioning as a leader. What determines whether or not we are directing, advising, teaching, mentoring, and coaching is who owns the agenda. You can see over the left-hand side. So think about the agenda as the issue, the project, the person's performance, their career, whatever it is. If the leader owns it all, they are directing. And as the leader is giving it away, and as the talent is assuming more and more of it, we're moving to the right end of the continuum. We're moving to the place where the talent owns all of the agenda. So while all of these are legitimate ways of functioning as leaders, and we move up and down this continuum all day long, what we really want to do is we want to continue to make that shift to the right, because that's where the lasting impact is. And you will know this because your stories would have come off the right-hand end of this continuum. Rarely do we hear somebody really grew, learned, developed, performed at a different level because somebody told them what to do. It's almost always at the right end of the continuum. Somebody challenged me, somebody encouraged me, somebody saw the very best in me. So when we look at this idea of coaching and leadership, all of these items along this continuum are in fact valid ways to lead. The real challenge for us is to push ourselves to be at the right end of the continuum as frequently as possible. The one haunting question, then, that sits over top of all of this for us is, do other people attribute their high performance and career acceleration to you? And this really is the watchword and the question that should be always in front of us as coaches. So let me share the next section with you, and we're going to call it the coaching perspective. Essentially, what this section is all about is the way coaches look at other people, the way coaches see themselves, the way coaches see themselves in the world of work and in relationship with other people. I love this quote from Johann von Goethe. Treat people as if they were what they ought to be, and you help them to become what they are capable of being. Why this quote is so meaningful to me is really what it says is the way we look at people and the way we treat them has a powerful impact in them achieving what they really are capable of achieving. And so for many of us who are coaches, this is a theme from which we operate. I'm going to give you do another quick exercise with you. You're about to see 6 photos of individuals. I'm going to flash them up on the screen. They won't be up very long. And if you can, please jot down very quickly for each photo, for each person in the photo, what kind of job do you think this person is likely to have? What one word best describes their personality? Would this person likely to be a friend of yours? Does this person look like somebody that would be a friend of yours? So as we go through these 6 photos, I would ask that you please try to answer these 3 questions. So if you ask just about anybody, are they judgmental? And our typical response is, no, I'm not judgmental. Judging and judging people is natural and is a natural part of the human conditions. The reason I did that exercise with you is if you're like me, you can quickly make judgments about other people. We make stuff up. We'll decide on whether or not they'd be friends or not friends. We'll decide on whether or not they're going to be the CEO or the receptionist. We decide on whether or not we'd like them or not like them. This is part of the natural human condition. And the reason I share this with you is because we're very transparent. And it's my belief that people know how we are judging them. And so coaches, in the coaching perspective, needs to be very unique. And I believe that great coaches see others as resourceful, talented, and fully capable of making their own decisions. And when we see people this way, they know that and they respond accordingly. If we, and I can tell you this, is that to be a great coach for many of us requires discipline and intentionality to actually make this choice. We choose to see people as resourceful, talented, and fully capable of making their own decisions. One of the big shifts that we need to make, especially if we are in a formal leadership role, is this, that we are no longer the expert. The person being coached is the expert. They are the experts in becoming the very best version of themselves. And so the coach takes the perspective that they see themselves as a vehicle for stimulating this, a vehicle for being a catalyst for this, a vehicle for inspiring this, a vehicle for challenging people to be this. So the third part is I'd like to share this idea of mastering the art of coaching. We are very much in the leadership development and coach training business, so this is a topic that is obviously very, very close to my heart. And I wanted to share with you an overview of some of the things I think are particularly important if you're considering either developing coaches in your organization or developing as a coach yourself. First of all, I believe that coaching is everyone's business. Coaching is everyone's business, and therefore developing coaching skills from individual contributors to the CEO needs to be paramount in our organization. If you look at the idea of coaching, is that it is a person having a dialogue with another person. At its very core, the receptionist can coach the CEO. The receptionist can coach the CEO if properly equipped to do so. Here's a quote that I hear quite frequently, especially from the more progressive organizations that are getting rid of their performance appraisal systems. We got rid of our performance appraisal system. We asked them to coach. Why don't they coach? And I must tell you that's endemic in our organizations today. I'm going to share with you just a little bit of neuroscience that might answer why people are not coaching. Is what we learn from neuroscience is that people, when they're asked to change, there's one overarching axiom. That means there's kind of one principle at play. And the play for all of us, every person on this call, myself included, is fear always trumps satisfaction. So going out and exhorting people to coach and tell them how great it's going to be does not trump the fear they have of what? The fear they have of their inability to excel at it. The neuroscience go on to tell us that embarrassment and humiliation are the things that will really prevent us from making a shift in any kind of behavior. So it's incumbent upon us in organizations to fully equip the individuals in our organization with the coaching skills and competencies and attitudes if we're going to exhort them to go out and be coaches. We talk a lot about creating a culture of coaching. We cannot create a culture of coaching unless we equip leaders at all levels to master that art of coaching. So how do leaders learn? This is a incredibly important topic when we're looking at coaching, because it comes to the very core how we can equip leaders to learn. I love this quote from Henry Mintzberg from McGill University. I replaced the term leadership with coaching, but it's the same thing. It says coaching, like swimming, cannot be learned by reading about it. You have to do it, and you have to experience it, and you have to get feedback on that. Coaching is a craft, but the cool thing about coaching is it's a craft that we all can develop. I have seen people from all walks of life, from all professions, from all cultures, in fact, being able to look at this idea of coaching, see it as a craft, and master the craft of coaching. What I thought I would do in this slide is just share some of the parameters that I think are particularly important if you're developing a training system or a development system for your leaders to become better coaches. The training programs need to be highly engaging, highly interactive, and highly experiential. The way you really learn to coach is you practice real coaching and you receive direct and immediate feedback on that coaching. The conversation is the primary vehicle for coaching, and there's lots of conversational tools that coaches need, primarily around asking questions, not exclusively, but primarily asking questions that really challenge assumptions and mental models. And also processes that help leaders, help coaches constructively confront behaviors. Constructive confrontation is a big part of coaching and a big part of leadership. And for a number of reasons, it's probably the area that we all do the least good job of. Making coaching a very affirming process, focusing on strengths, talents, and ability. And also helping people think differently, help people see perspectives that they would not have seen before, help them look at daring and radical possibilities in their world. So if you look at that slide, that slide is meant to perform an aspirational description of what a great craft development program would look like. I do want to talk to you just about 3 key skills that you would want to consider if you're creating a coach training program. The first one is listen like a coach. So I'm going to talk about listen like a coach, speak like a coach, and think like a coach. The first one is listen like a coach. Coaches listen differently. Coaches listen at a deep level. And in fact, we have to stop and really be intentional about listening in a different way. Coaches listen beyond the words. They even listen somewhat beyond the meaning. They listen for aspirations. They listen for values. They listen for emotions. They listen for inconsistencies. They listen for what's not being said. You'll know when you're in the presence of a great coach because it'll feel a little bit unnerving because they'll be listening to you at such a deep level. Think like a coach. Coaches think differently. And here's what's going on in the mind of a coach when you're having a conversation with her or him. Here's what she or he is thinking. The number one thing they're thinking about is how can I subordinate my needs and wants and ego in this moment so that I can bring all that I have into this conversation. And then secondly, what they're thinking about is in this moment, what's the best thing I can say or not say that would have the most positive impact on the other person? Is it a piece of feedback? Is it a challenge? Is it a word of encouragement, affirmation? Is it nothing at all? Is it just silence in that moment? And thirdly, the third skill is to speak like a coach. A coaching conversation is different. It's more honest, it's more intense, it's more challenging in many ways. But when you think about the coaching conversation, there's two responsibilities. Think back on the coaching impact diagram. The talent has responsibility for the agenda, whatever it is. The talent has responsibility for the agenda. But the coach has responsibility for shaping the conversation. The coach has responsibility for guiding the conversation, looking at what pathway can that conversation go down that would be most fertile for the other person. Maybe it's a conversation that is helping the person move past mistakes and failures that they've had. Maybe it's a conversation that helps the other person face up to reality. Maybe it's a conversation that challenges the other person to take actions that they're avoiding, hold themselves accountable when they're blaming other people, or to stop selling themselves short. These are the things that great coaches do to speak like a coach. In the last part here, I'd like to give you just a brief overview of what we call the 3C coaching model. Now, the 3C coaching model is not so much, as I mentioned before, not so much a specific 5-step or 7-step, 3-step coaching program. I would really encourage you to look at this as a meta model, a model that sits over top of all other actions and behaviors, a model that can really inform your growth as a leader and as a coach, and inform how you interact with others on a daily basis as well. The 3C coaching model is based on, I believe, 3 profound questions. And they're questions that we all need to confront as leaders. Have I earned the right to coach? Do I establish the kind of relationships necessary for coaching? And am I willing to engage in the intensely honest conversations that truly stimulate profound learning, development, change in others? These 3 questions need to be addressed by all of us who lead and coach. And it's how we address these questions really determines our effectiveness as a coach. Character, connection, conversation. Character, earning the right to coach. Connection, special relationships. Conversation, the kind of conversations that we have that really inspire change in others. When you look at this idea of coaching, of character, here's one of my favorite quotes. We all use the term authenticity a lot in all kinds of ways in organizations, but this is one of my favorite quotes. Authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day. It's about the choice to show up and be real. It's about the choice to be honest. It's a choice to let our true selves be seen. What's really cool about that particular quote is that we can all make choices. When we get up tomorrow morning, we make choices that day to function as an authentic leader, as an authentic coach. So I really challenge you at this point to be thinking about this as a map, what I have on the slide here right now, as a map that indicates the current degree of you earning the right to coach. So again, select, in this case, 5 people. Put yourself at the center, maybe sketch out this chart, and make note of those 5 people on a chart as I have on this slide. Now, as you're doing that, to be honest with yourselves and really to challenge yourselves to lift your game and to see whether or not you, in fact, have earned the right to coach. I'd like to, I would encourage you to think about being each one of those people. What would it be like to be that person? And would they, looking over at you, would they see you as a coach? Would you have earned the right to coach them? Interesting, when I do speeches on coaching, at the end of the speech, I often get asked questions. And the one question that comes up probably most frequently is this: Greg, what do I do with that person in my organization that is uncoachable? And we all have them. We all look around. We see people in the organization that we would consider to be uncoachable. Now, I recognize that there are some people that probably have given up on learning and growing and development, but I suggest that that is in the very, very distinct minority. If I'm really honest with myself, and if I look out into my organization, or if I look out into my community, and I see people that I would consider to be uncoachable, if I'm being truthful, it's probably not that they're uncoachable. What's probably true is they don't want coaching from me. And I know this to be true because when you think about it, if there was somebody in your organization who you really trusted, who you knew had your very best interests at heart, who you knew was a really good coach, would you not want to engage with that person to talk about you, to talk about what your aspirations, your goals, your objectives, your career? Of course, most of us would. So what's happening, if I see somebody who is uncoachable, it's probably because I'm not that person to them. We need to really look at this idea of uncoachability first through the lenses of our own eyes, as opposed to blaming others. Connection. One of the things that is hard for many of us to learn, especially those of us who are supervisors and managers, is that it's only coaching when the other person, the talent, is a willing participant. And we need to make this special connection with people, with other people, even those who work for us. We have no authority over them that can make them a willing participant. We need to create the kinds of connections with them where they believe our intentions are honorable. Our intentions are for them to succeed in their job, in their career, in their work. One of my favorite quotes, but also a quote that I use in talks and workshops and in webinars like this with great trepidation, because it does sound kind of gooey. And that's this, that coaching is an act of faith in others. But when you think of it, that's really what it is. And that's how we connect with others. You probably can think back in your life and your career of somebody who really had some faith in you. Somebody believed in you in some special way. Now, for most of us, that was our parents. And then into the workforce, it might have been our first boss. It might have been a professor at university. But that person would have a powerful impact on us, because it is often through other people having this faith in us that has allowed us to see a really bigger world for ourselves, more possibilities, a higher level of performance, a more challenging career in some way. So the last element in the 3C model is this idea of the conversation. Making conversations matter. Formal coaching conversations matter, but also that 30-second hallway conversation. Often, when we look at a conversation and how coaches bring value to the conversation, it's really about helping others deal with constraints. When you think about it, almost everything we have succeeded at, maybe everything we've succeeded at so far in our careers, is by addressing and surmounting constraints, things that have held us back. We all have constraints in some way, but we also all come at the world to some degree as a victim. We almost all come at the world at some degree as a victim. Oh, ain't it awful? The market's unfair. People are punishing us in some way. I don't get an even break. It's Sally's fault to some degree. One of the great things about a good coach and a good coaching conversation is they will challenge us to be a warrior, challenge us to go out and seize our own part of the world, change the things that are important to us, to find new pathways forward, to be explorers, to be inventors, to really seize on our talents and our opportunities in some way and stop being a victim. So one of the real important qualities of a good coaching conversation is helping people move and recognize their constraints as opportunities in some way and to making that shift. There's all kinds of outcomes that will show up as a result of coaching conversations, and we talked about some of those earlier. But if you look at the actual change in the individual, it really is twofold. It really is twofold. There's two things that come out of a great coaching conversation. Number one is insight. The other person is thinking differently in some way, but it doesn't stop there. They take action. One of the problems with a lot of coaching programs is they stop at the idea of insight, that the other person has some brilliant new idea. A great coach will move towards action. It's not just the insight, it's the action. A great coach will challenge the talent to take action. We'll ask questions like, okay, what's the most potent step you can take? What resources do you need? To whom are you going to be accountable? How are you going to know when you're successful? What breakthroughs are you going to take? So I would really encourage you to be thinking about the complexities of the coaching conversation, but the simplicity of those two words, intention and action. Thank you for listening to those 4 parts of coaching. My hope is that they have provided you some insight and some ideas about how you might look at developing as a coach and how you might help others in your organization also develop as a coach. Just a few closing comments, if I could. There are 4 big ideas that are woven through this conversation here today. Number 1 is great coaches look at the world, look at people differently. They have the perspective that those they coach are creative, resourceful, and full of potential. Number 2, great coaches have earned the right to coach. You can look around your organization and you'll see men and women, even if they don't call themselves coaches, they will stand out because of the nature of their character. And also those who are great coaches are able to form these connections, these unique relationships with other people. And fourthly, they engage in conversations that are difficult, often risky conversations. They'll talk about things that other people will not. We often look at this idea of creating a coaching culture, not just helping individuals become better coaches. And there's a question at the very core of that. And it's this idea that we as leaders, before we can start holding other people accountable to be great coaches, the most senior leaders in organizations need to see themselves as being accountable for the performance, learning, and development of team members. If we see that as our prime calling, that's really the first step in creating a culture of coaching. We're in the change business. We're in the leadership development business. And we see great leadership and great coaching not as a destination. You never really get there. It really is about a journey that we're on about continually improving and continually changing. The one thing I would encourage you to do is if you want to become a better coach, you want to become a better leader, you need to do differently. You need to show up and do differently. But the real cool thing about that is every one of us can do it tomorrow morning. Every one of us can get up tomorrow morning and be committed to doing the same kind of things that great leaders do. When you look at coaching as well, it really is a career-long journey. I have been coaching for probably 20 to 25 years. I've been honored to work with some of the finest leaders on the planet. But I can also tell you this, that my development is still only veneer thin. I continue to learn about how I can impact my clients and the people around me in different and positive ways. And I only can do that, though, is if I stay open to the learnings that come along the way. I want to thank you for listening to me through this webinar, and I'll turn it back to Julie.
Thanks, Greg. And thanks so much for all your questions. We'll get to them in just a minute, but before we do, I just want to tell you a little bit about the Bluepoint coaching series, which equips leaders from the shop floor to the executive suite with practical coaching skills and tools. Bluepoint offers 3 coach training programs that are all based on the 3C coaching model that Greg referred to today. Our clients appreciate having this one consistent model for coaching and one set of language for all the levels of leadership within their organization. The powerful coaching conversation is for new leaders and has been designed to provide participants with a strong foundation of coaching principles and practices, enabling them to have more meaningful conversations. Leader as Coach offers a more advanced approach to coaching for mid to senior level leaders, and it challenges participants to earn the right to coach others, to create relationships that confront real issues, and to engage in potent performance-changing conversations. And finally, our Executive Leader as Coach program is an intense development program for executives and senior leaders who really want to be instrumental in creating an organization-wide coaching culture. Bluepoint's coaching programs are all designed to be adaptable to client-specific objectives and culture. Our programs allow you to weave your own unique brand, values, and needs around the content framework. And we're proud to have partnered with some of the finest companies in the world to create custom versions of our coaching programs. At Bluepoint, we always have designed our programs to help leaders make real, sustained change in their day-to-day behavior. We offer a number of different post-workshop learning application tools, including application coaching, learning accountability trios, and we're very excited about our new micro e-learning programs. Micro e-learning enables participants to more easily absorb and retain information by offering short, focused lessons which are designed to reinforce concepts from the workshop and challenge participants to really apply their personal learnings in order to create lasting behavior change. Our micro e-learning programs are 12 to 16 weeks long and include a series of strategically designed messages that are sent to participants 2 to 3 times a week for several months following the workshop. We use a sequence of videos, podcasts, quizzes, surveys, and assignments that help participants refresh and deepen their understanding of the workshop concepts, reflect on their current leadership practices, and make real sustained change in their day-to-day behavior. If you'd like more information about any of our coaching programs, please visit our website at bluepointleadership.com or contact me at juliehenry@bluepointleadership.com. Now, let's get to your questions. And we're not going to be able to get to all the questions we received today, but I do have a couple, Greg, that I would love to pose. Our first question, and I'm just going to read it. I'm in HR and our leaders say they have no time to coach. How can I help them to build coaching and feedback into their everyday work?
Yeah, thank you, Julie. And I do hear that question quite frequently as well. And it is a challenge. I mean, time is one of the most precious commodities these days. My experience with supervisors and managers who make a real commitment to coaching is this. Number one is when they do it and they do it religiously and they do it regularly and they do it well, is that their team members, the quality and quantity of work that they are able to do goes up dramatically. And so, in fact, a lot of the work that the supervisor and manager would do previously and would draw up a lot of their time can be done by other people and through the coaching process. Secondly, it really is a question of priorities. We all have too much to do. And so we need to choose where, as leaders, we can have the most impact on our team members. And helping our team members perform at a higher level, learn faster and faster and faster, and develop in their own careers needs to be a priority. And if that's not a priority, then I have no response. And so the idea that we, as catalysts for the learning and growth of others, is a priority, as opposed to us spending our time always doing things, I think is really that first step.
Thanks, Greg. I have another question here. This is a good one. Could you recommend 2 to 3 good reflective questions that coaches can ask their talent to begin building an effective coaching relationship?
Yes, I probably can. It's a great question. And the reason it's a great question is I believe in a conversation, the first question we ask really influences the entire conversation. We get into a rut and we stay there. And so the kind of question that they're asking for, that this person is asking for, is the kind of question that would be very positive and would keep the conversation at a very coach-like and very positive way. So I might ask a question such as, when you're at your best, what are you doing? I might ask a question as, when you were most successful in your career, in a previous life, what did that look like? Or I might ask a question like, how can you do more of the work that you love? I might ask a question like, if you could use all of your talents, all of your strengths, what would be possible? And so those kind of questions not only are appreciative and affirmative, they also, underlying those questions, are a couple of points. One is that you have talent, you've done great work, you can do great work. And so that's a presumption in the question, but it also leaves the responsibility for doing something about that with the other person. Thanks for that question. Whoever asked that question, thank you for that question. It's a great question.
Okay, Greg, I think we have time for one more. What are some best practices that will help move our organization to a more coach-like culture?
Again, a very good question, and in fact, that's a question that organizations right across the continent are concerned about these days. Is that how do we shift towards a culture where conversations are routine, and their coaching conversations are routine, and they result in learning and nimbleness and high performance and accelerated career development. So that would be the hallmark of a coaching culture. So if you think about this idea of culture, I like the definition, this definition best, that culture is the way you think, act, and interact. So we need, and we need it really at the most senior level of the organizations to be thinking, acting, and interacting differently. So we need to be thinking about how we can really honor and value high performance. Now, you may think that that's natural in every organization. It's not. How are we going to demonstrate as senior leaders that we really appreciate high performance, we really appreciate agile, quick learning, we really appreciate development? So that's how we think. And then how we act would be, if we are going to ask you to be coaches, we're going to equip you to be coaches. And so we're going to invest in you as coaches. Workshops, we're going to give you coaches, we're going to value coaching in your own personal development. And then interact is that I think that senior leaders in the organizations need to model great coaching. They need to be able to coach each other. They need to be able to welcome coaching. I will tell you this, you will be able to tell when you're really on the road to having a coaching culture is when one of the most senior leaders in the organization invites coaching from a man or woman 2 or 3 layers below them in the organization. That's when you know people are really serious about coaching, is when they'll invite coaching from somebody much more junior to them in the organization.
Great. Thanks so much, Greg. And I really appreciate your time today and sharing your expertise with all of us. It's been wonderful to have you on this webinar, Greg.
You're welcome. Thank you, Julie.